Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this great panel. Before I make an opening comment, you heard that I was a shareholder of Ronston. I wish I still was, because I'd be into Murray's office wanting to know why he's spent $45,000 on internet charges watching the America's Cup and not doing his job. Sailing has gone through an absolutely magnificent period in this country in the last few years. Outside the Volvo Ocean Race, the two leading events in this world are the Olympic Games and the America's Cup. Be an interesting discussion later on with the guys in regards to nationality and sailing with your own country, and thank God it hasn't happened that way, because we wouldn't have the experience and wouldn't have the opportunity of meeting four of the greatest sailors in the world competing in the America's Cup. Because since John last did it, it's taken now Bob Oakley to put his hand up for 2017 and go after the Holy Grail. So these two great events have allowed this country to flourish in the eyes of the public and in the eyes of other sports, and that is the sport of sailing. And we talk about all these accolades, all these international awards and gold medalists and silver medalists that are sitting in front of me. But there's another component part of this, and that is the reputation of these guys as human beings. And I think it's interesting, and Tom plays this down a bit, that as a member of the Australian Olympic Committee, I guess I took great pride in hearing that Tom was voted by the Olympians Club of Australia, which is past and present Olympians, as the male athlete of the London Olympic Games. I also, as a member of the Australian Sports Commission, as well as the AOC, get to see a lot of other sport. And if there is a test in regards to attitude, a test in regards to the planning, the process, not only the results of being the number one sport in Australia, is sailing is very much the guiding beacon. And to Peter Condy, to Victor and Jonesy and all those that are involved with sailing, what a great credit you are. And I can just say with confidence, as John would know now, in swimming is the example that sailing has provided, not only in performance but in behaviour, and all the other things that drive these guys now to sail on large crude boats, to give orders, to get respect, just shows what they've been through. And I think you can feel very proud that the two major sports in sailing, the America's Cup and the Olympic Games, that what sits alongside me now are the greatest examples of sportsmanship, of the Olympic spirit, of fair play and outstanding achievement. Slingsby got too much of a clap when he got up, and on behalf of our Kiwi Vice President here, we don't want to overplay the hand with Oracle. I think you overdid it, ladies and gentlemen, but we'll come to that in a little while. So perhaps if I could just start out, not wanting to have the microphone for a whole lot of time, but, well, yes, I would like it a whole lot of time. Thanks for coming, guys. Why don't I just start this off by, I'll start with you, Goobs. I want to hear, for the benefit of the audience and, diverse crowd that is, how did you get into sailing? How did you get into sailing with Nathan? What was your pathway into this sport from the age of 12, let's say, until we jagged you into the Australian sailing team?
Yeah, me and Nath grew up in the same sort of area, and grew up sailing boats against each other at the same club. And when I was 10, I started sailing with Nathan in a Flying 11, and I used to sail with my brother, and we didn't get along too well. And Nath was sailing with his brother, and they were a little bit light, so we sort of swapped over, and I was sailing with Nath for a little bit, and we had some success. And then we went our separate ways again. And I was steering for a little while, and Nath started sailing with his brother because he was now the right size. And yeah, Nath had done a couple of youth worlds, and the guy who was sailing youth worlds with was a bit old, so he said, "Oh, do you want to come back on board?" And we did a youth worlds in the 420, which we were lucky enough to win. And yeah, we've always either sailed against each other or with each other. And yeah, so the first campaign he did in the 49, and he was sailing with Ben while I was still finishing my HSC, and that all finished up, and they were really close to getting a medal, but you know they had some trouble down the last run. And yeah, Ben was then married and was looking at having kids, and he's a physio, and so he sort of pursued that, and I got my opportunity to do a campaign with Nathan. That's how I got involved with the AST.
Well done. Nathan, do you want to just reflect on that last race, that gold medal race in Beijing? I mean, let's put it, for people for up there, 25 knots, there's 2 knots of set running. That was you were the last one to go in, but everyone in the gold medal fleet went in that day, didn't they?
Yeah, I probably want to remember China as much as Tommy does.
Yeah, we'll get to Tommy later.
And but it was tough, and if anyone sticks around for the next few days, you're going to see us doing the same thing. 50 metres out there. It's 49 is a tough boat to sail, and I'm sure Mark could agree. When you're out there and it's bumpy and it's windy, they have a tendency to go a little bow down. And we did that medal race and survived the 3 laps without a capsize, and we're on ley line to the finish. And we were in first. We didn't really know where everyone else was, but we kind of thought we were going to have a medal, hopefully a gold. And we capsized, inside of the finishing line, and it was a pretty tough thing to swallow. But I think moments like that in your career or in your life are quite important, because it meant for the next 4 years, when I started sailing with Goobs, that we had a very clear goal, and that goal was to make sure that was never going to happen. And it wasn't just that capsize wasn't going to happen. It was like, well, when the last race comes around, it's not going to be important. And we made sure that all we had to do was make it around the course in that last race to win the gold. So,
well, Nathan, you certainly made that true, because in the London Olympics, you were the only sailors in A class that effectively didn't have to do the medal race because you had so many points on the board. Outstanding work, Valerie. And to you, good, for carrying him around.
we still had a capsize in that Olympics, but he saved me again.
I know, he saved you a lot of times. So Nathan, we heard about Goobs' background. What about your background? In skiffs mainly, up there on the Central Coast. How did you develop into the sport?
Yeah, well, Goobs and I both grew up on Lake Macquarie, just near Newcastle, and we sailed out of the Wanji Sailing Club. And I got into it from a young age of about 5 years old, sailing the sabos up there. And as it progressed, our families, there was quite a few families that were involved, and our parents realised that to get good at sailing, you need to start travelling. So we went around the New South Wales circuit, and then started doing all the national titles in the sabos. And then the Flying 11 was the next stepping stone, where Goobs and I sailed together and won a national titles. And from there, it was sort of a bit tough, because you're at the age of 13, 14, and you don't really know what to do. School's really important, and you're winning these national titles, but you don't really know what it means. And your parents tell you that there's no money in sailing, and go to school and earn some, get a job and earn some money. But I didn't really listen, and they were very supportive. And Victor, I remember he came to me when I was about 14 or 15. I think maybe I just won my first Youth Worlds in the 29er, and he came to me and said, we want you to be a part of the Australian sailing team. And I remember taking the phone call and not really knowing what that meant, because I was year 9 or year 10 at school. But I went down and I went sailing with him, and I started sailing 470s, and that was my pathway into Olympic sailing. And I figured the best way for me to learn about the Olympics is to sail with the best and to be coached by the best. So I worked with Victor and Nathan Wilmot and Malcolm Page and Jenny and B at the time, and trained with them in the lead up to the Athens Olympics. And then after that, I spoke with Victor, and it was quite obvious I was too big for a 470. I was 75 kilos trying to drive a 470, and neither Matt or Will looked that heavy, so it was quite obvious to move to a 49er, and that's sort of how I progressed.
Yeah. They were too slow for you, weren't they? No, you weren't really interested in them. They were a bit of a slow boat for you.
Yeah, I like
Yeah,
fast boats.
thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I was trying to be polite.
we're not doing politeness tonight.
Okay.
Glenn, up there in the country, Victoria, around the lakes. Tell us the background. How did you get into the sport?
Yeah, look, it's my mum was actually the sort of the sailor of our family, and met my dad in Melbourne, where they were both working, and decided that moving to Bendigo was going to be a nice place to have a family, and basically I grew up at Lake Epilock, just as a little tacker, just mucking around with boats while mum and dad went sailing, and basically just I guess learned how to sail on a lake, and did a lot of my sailing there until I was 10 years old, and did my first saltwater regatta on a Northbridge Junior down at Macrae, which now I'm a member of, and we live down there now. Fantastic club, and that was the first time I did. First time I got salty, and that was 1988. And basically, I got the bug, for the salt water and sailing in waves, and had the choice at the age of 13, basically, to whether to sail a moth, a sabre dinghy, or a paper tiger catamaran, and the paper tiger was the cheapest that I could afford at the time. Paying for it myself, and bought myself a paper tiger at the age of 13 and weighing 37 kilos, so probably a bit light for a 470, so basically taught myself how to sort of get around the track on the paper tiger, and then at the age of 16 had to make a pretty big life choice, basically, as to whether to continue on with my education and go forward, either wanting to be a meteorologist or a surveyor. At the time was what I was wanting to do, but had the wonderful opportunity of becoming an apprentice sailmaker, and basically got offered the job on the Wednesday and started work the following Monday, and that for me I think was pivotal in my sort of sailing going forwards. And the other guys, it was a really difficult situation education-wise. A lot of friends and family were sort of quite against me going forwards to become a sailmaker, but basically the maths and the science aspect that I enjoyed going through school, I actually could put into sailmaking. I really enjoyed working with my hands, and I'm still a sailmaker today. So not that I stick as many sails together as I'd like to, but the last sail actually stuck together was the sail that Darren and I used in China, in Beijing, actually. So still got that main sail, Darren. I didn't sell that one. I'm going to hang it in the roof. It's the only one I haven't sold, actually. But so growing up in Bendigo, moving down to the peninsula, and had my first overseas experience at the age of 18, where I went over to do my first World Championship, not really knowing anything about travelling or being overseas, and went over and sailed in Spain, and had my 19th birthday at the regatta, and managed to get round the track in one piece and win the regatta, and that basically just gave me a really good opportunity to do more regattas and more sailing, and certainly further down the track, having the opportunity to team up with Darren on the Tornado, going through the early 2000s and filling in for John Forbes a little bit, and then putting a really decent campaign together with Darren and sort of pooling our knowledge and our resource together. My goal of making it to the Olympics was a reality, and unfortunately we didn't quite reach the ultimate goal, which the guys beside me did, but it really hasn't changed the pathway that I've taken in the future, and I think probably either for Darren as well, but it has certainly given us the opportunity to move in different circles, and I think the sailing opportunities that multi-hull sailing is, and being a cat whacker, growing up, sailing a catamaran and a multi-hull, who would have thought, as a young kid, that you'd be sailing around on 72-foot carbon fibre missiles at 40 plus knots, and for me it's just an absolute wonderful lifestyle and wonderful life, and being able to go through from a young age through do World Championships into the Olympics and now into the America's Cup is just something that I could never have ever really dreamt of. Although when I was a kid I did dream of that, but you got to aim for the stars if you want to hit the moon, and I think that's one thing that I think all the young guys that are coming through at the moment really need to dream big, because they can turn into reality if you really want it.
So, Glenn, you enjoy speed, don't you? Can I... We don't clap. He's a raft sailor, not too much. And you don't get the rafting. Can I just tell a little story? Glenn and I, not first met, but years ago, thanks to Ronston, thanks to you, Alistair, Ronston had a series of promotional of marketing. In those days, I was president of an AFL footy club, St Kilda, that needs a lot of marketing right now. And Ronston ran a series for young aspiring sailors to come through and talk about promoting themselves and marketing. And the great man, Johnny Bertrand, and I addressed these young sailors and down at Royal Brighton Yacht Club. And this young guy arrived, ladies and gentlemen, with the full black leathers on, the earring. And Johnny leaned over to me and said, "Who is this cat?" And I said, "He's going to be one of the greatest raft sailors in the world." And I proved it true, John. Correct. Continues to be. Slingsby. Tom, what's your background? Give us the background and where you started from and where you are, where you got to. Let's talk up to, say, the Beijing Olympics.
Okay.
We're going to leave Beijing. We're not going to talk about Beijing tonight.
For me, yeah, I grew up, my mum was a tennis player, my dad was a sailor, and as kids we had two sports. We could be a tennis player and go to tennis training with mum as she played a lot, or we could go to sailing with dad. And for me, tennis was always the goal. I obviously, Pete Sampras and all that, they were my idols, and I sailed 1 day a week on Saturdays, and I probably played 7 days a week. I remember I used to get up before school, train for 2 hours, and then straight after school finished, I used to run from school to the tennis courts and start playing tennis. And so that was an obsession. It overtook my whole life. And then at about 14, 15 years old, I'd still been sailing my 1 day a week club racing. And I remember I just completely lost the love for it. I felt pressured by coaches, by other people to perform, and it wasn't for me anymore. And so I quit. I quit completely. I didn't pick up a racket for about 7 years. That's how much it wasn't a passion anymore. It was just a job. But before that, I did sabos and got beaten handsomely by Nathan, this 2 years younger than me, and I couldn't even touch him. I wasn't interested in the sport then either. But eventually, and then I remember getting beaten by Nathan all the time, and I wanted a change, and my older sister bought a laser, and I thought, that sounds really good. And my dad said, you can't have a laser, you're too small. I was 45 kilos. I convinced him to get me a laser, and I remember when I first started sailing the laser, I used to have to put brown duct tape on the bottom of the boat with my name. I actually wrote my name, Tom, so that whenever I capsized, the rescue boats could come help me up, because I didn't weigh enough to stand on the centreboard and get the boat upright. So I was a bit of a liability for the rescue boats, and whenever I capsized, it was race over.
Perhaps they should have done that to Glenn when he nearly tipped the big boat in, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
And then from there, I sailed that 1 day a week. But then when I quit tennis, I wasn't really an academic, so I had a lot of time on my hands, and school wasn't the thing for me.
Don't downplay it, Tommy. You and I have been through Oxford together.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
We walked through in the London Olympic Games.
And so I had all this time after school. I'd been playing tennis and I wasn't anymore, and so I started sailing a lot more. And I had a sister who was really good. She finished 6th in the worlds, in the women's radial worlds, and so she was always better than me. And eventually I got to her level, and then set my sight on the nationals. And when I was 14, I think it was, I finished 61st in my first laser nationals, and then all of a sudden I had all this time to train, and after a few months of training I won the next nationals in the laser radials, and that was sort of where first I realised that I've got a chance in this sport, and I didn't really know what was next, and I remember around the same time though, I saw the Olympics in Sydney. It was the same year actually, and watched Robert Scheidt dueling Ben Ainsley, and just thought that's something I really want to do. That's what I want to be doing in, I said 4 years, but it took me 8. Everything I did from then on, obviously I was juggling school, but everything I did was set on winning Olympic gold medal, and yeah, then so goes on to 2008.
Which 2008 was the Beijing Olympics, and we're going to leave that out of its life, and we're going to start talking about the London Olympics, and then we're going to get into discussions about how the guys got signed up, how they entered the America's Cup, how they were contracted, what the play was, when they put their minds to it. So I'll start with you. I know, Nathan, the America's Cup guys became interested in you. When did it all unfold for you sailing these great craft?
I think, I was obviously very interested in the Cup, especially when it went to the multi-hulls and watched all that. And I remember I was doing an A-class nationals at Wanji Sailing Club, started 2012, and the Olympics is 8 months away, but here I'm again playing in other boats, as I tend to do.
Slowly getting impressed.
Yeah, and Glenn said to me, he's like, oh, you should come and do the A-class nationals. I'm like, oh yeah. He's like, look, we'll organise a container, the boat will show up, you can go sailing. So I got 2 or 3 days training in, and halfway through the event, I was doing quite well, and I got a phone call from Troy Tyndall, who was working with Team Korea, and said, are you interested in driving our AC45 for the season? And I thought, I've got enough on my plate, just trying to do the 49er with Goobs and go to the Olympics. But I know one thing in this sport is that you've got to take your opportunities when they come. You say no a couple of times and they don't ever come around again. So, I had a good chat with Goobs and Emmett, and we decided that it would fit in. So I started doing the World Series with Team Korea. And, middle of the Olympics, I got an email, asking if I was interested to join Artemis. And I just wrote back and said, I've got a bid on at the moment, and let me talk to you in a couple of weeks. So it sort of was progressing throughout last year, and it's amazing what can happen if you take your opportunities when they come.
And Goobs, how did he line up with Artemis? Was it on shore, wasn't it, first, Goobs, before you managed to get on the boat and once again control everything?
Yeah, so after the games, Nate signed on, and I got an email around November, December, late that year, and it was from Nathan. He said, we've got the big boat going now, and we're short of a few staff maintaining the 45. Do you want to come over and possibly be a boat captain on one of the AC45s? And I saw the opportunity as a good way to meet everyone involved in it, and maybe line up a sailing gig for next time around. And so I signed on, went over there, was boat captain on one of the 45s. And so I don't know if many of you know this, but Artemis wasn't always going to be foiling. We lined up with Tommy's boat, Oracle, a few times, and it became pretty obvious that was the way to go. So we had a rush to try to change a few things around, and we were modifying a 45 to become a foiling boat as quickly as possible. So I had a few late nights there with the boat builders, helping do the mods on the boat. Pretty useless on the tools, but they were showing me how it's all done. And so because I'd spent a bit of time working on it, I got a bit of an opportunity to trim the wing on it. And things just rolled along from there, and I was pretty lucky to have the opportunity to sail on the big boat.
Well done. Now, Glenn, you brought these guys together because if it wasn't for you, they would have never got on to catamarans, rafts, whatever you want to call them in their lives. You brought these guys together and you've made them in. Have they thanked you enough for what you have done? Tell them a story how you got them together and took boats to regattas, you got them out sailing. And I say this on your behalf, These two guys have tried to beat you 6 years. They've never beaten you. And it's taken Slingsby for the America's Cup to finally beat you on a raft. Give us a background how you got the guys involved and the art of sailing multi-hull.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's one of those ones. I mean, they're all just boats at the end of the day. But for me, growing up, you know, the sort of the speed aspect of sailing for me was a real big thing. And you know, I was into I grew up, you know, not just sailing, but into BMX and then race motocross and got into enduro motorbike riding and then started doing track riding on road bikes and things like that. And for me, you know, going fast and being, you know, having that adrenaline rush is something that sort of makes me tick. But you know, it's the racing aspect that I really enjoy. And I remember after the you know, the Beijing Olympics, I sort of remember having a talk to Tommy and to Nath, sort of saying, well, you know, what are you guys doing after this? And they said, oh, you know, bloody hell, you know, as you all do after the Olympic Games. I said, well, you know, how about if you guys, you know, have a think about doing the A class, I'll have a think about doing a moth or something like that. And so basically these guys took it on, and there was a couple of other guys there, you know, Jimmy Spittle, you know, a couple of other.
For the Kiwis' sake, you just get the name down a bit.
Yeah. But you know, there was some really good guys that came into the A class from other classes to sort of have a go at multi-hull sailing, and the A class being a, you know, sort of a development class. It's a single-handed boat, so you haven't got a goobs to get you around the track and do all the work for you. So you've got to hang on to the main sheet, you've got to steer, and you know, it's good fun. And at the end of the day, these guys took it on. We did the World Championships at Belmont, and they did an amazing job, and everyone saw straight away that, you know, their talents from skiff sailing and dinghy sailing could cross over immediately into multi-hulls. And basically from there on in, you know, they well, you saw the TV before. It speaks for itself. I mean, their talent, you know, I think the cream always rises to the top, and I don't think it matters really what boats these guys sail. At the end of the day, I think you put them on anything and they'll be still sitting here in a few years' time. They've got, you know, they've got the drive and the passion and the skill set to be able to do pretty much anything sailing-wise. So it was great to have them involved in multi-hulls for sure.
Before these guys started up on the AC boats, Glenn, you were coach for the previous syndicate that won the America's Cup. You were you didn't sail on the boat, but you were off-water coach. So you had a good lead-in into understanding the technology and all the changes. So you know, let's talk a little bit about that, briefly about that experience.
Yeah, well, look, the other guy that I spoke about before, I won't mention his name again, but he was at the regatta as well. And yeah, basically, you know, they needed some help to get, you know, the 90-foot trimaran going fast. They had to race that against another 90-foot multi-hull, being the Swiss Alinghi boat. And so I basically had the opportunity to do some coaching work initially with Oracle, or BMW Oracle at the time then, on the Extreme 40 catamarans, and I had a few other coaches come in, but I you know, got along well with all the guys, and you know, the design and the technology aspect for me was really interesting, coming from sort of a, you know, sail making background, playing with masts and rigs, and then into the A class where you can sort of play with foils and hulls. It was just a bigger version of all the things I really were starting to enjoy with my yachting, and basically worked with those guys for a year and a half, and the only thing that was left original on that, you know, in the end 115-foot trimaran was basically the beams and the centre hull. Absolutely everything else on the boat was completely replaced from when they first launched the boat. So it was a massive development program, and it was an amazing role for myself to come from an Olympic program to then sort of almost be thrown into the deep end of a America's Cup program that was sort of halfway through its evolution. And it really gave me a big insight into, you know, how the America's Cup operated. Although it was a bit of an unusual America's Cup compared to what the version 5 boats were previously, it was for me, you know, as a kid that was sort of growing up, you know, pushing trimarans around your local lake, you know, models and making little things like that. It was amazing to be able to do it firsthand. And for me, you know, going from the opportunity to work with Oracle for the 33rd America's Cup, you know, when the team was successful there, it sort of opened new opportunities with the, you know, the AC 72 class, which was.
So let me just stick to that, mate. You know, after you did that one, to hook up with the Kiwis, because the Kiwis wanted to keep it, for all the good reasons, very much themselves. You had to teach virtually the crew how to sail rafts. I mean, what everyone says is that you did the most outstanding job in bringing these guys up to speed. They learned because they're good sailors. What was your decision to get into the into the Kiwis? How did they attract you? What was the attractive part about? They had the budget, they had the money, had known sailors. What attracted you to doing the Kiwi deal?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, Team New Zealand to me had always been a team that was, culturally very, very strong, very similar to the values that we have here in Australia, in actual fact. And I think the two countries are very similar in many, many respects. And Grant Dalton, I think, can be quite persuasive, as I think can Victor and a few of the other guys around that we've all got to know over the years. But basically, for me, the opportunity to work close to home was a very, very, very strong one. As Matt's just sort of experiencing with a new baby, we had a very young family just starting, and that family network and support being close by was attractive. But it was mainly, just the fact that it was going to be a fantastic new challenge with a new group of guys, a new team, but a team that was already very well established and had runs on the board. And at the end of the day, I didn't see many other teams being able to take that challenge on, but certainly the Kiwis were wanting to take it on wholeheartedly, and I thought that I could make a big difference to a team that hadn't done much multi-hull sailing previously.
And what a big difference you made. In fact, Glenn, I think, gave one of the quotes to the America's Cup. If you all recall that magnificent footage of when they did that unscheduled tack, and there was 3 guys to leeward, then became 3 guys to windward. And so I guess I'm not a mathematician. Tom and you and I could work this out together. So 72 foot, 70. So there was 73 foot in the air. And somebody asked Glenn Ashby what he could see up there at that sort of poignant moment. And he said, I can see my house. And somebody said, what, see your house in San Francisco Bay? He said, no, mate, I can see it back in New Zealand. Beautiful quote, Glenn. Tom, over to you. The America's Cup. You and Spittle, Oracle, had the money, had the big program. I've read some great interviews that you've given about wanting to be with successful people, etc., like that. What led you into it? How did you, who approached you, and what gave you, what decision-making process do you go through?
For me, I'd sort of, after 2008, I went, same with Nathan, all us 3 just sat down and had a conversation, but more so Nathan and myself, and we said, look, let's just sail everything we can get our hands on, whether it's moths, A-classes, far 40s, whatever boat we can. Let's just sail everything and learn as much as we can. And that's what we did for a couple of years there. We just sailed anything we could get our hands on, and then I just learnt so much, and I realised how much there is to learn in sailing. We were dealing with the Olympic classes, and me specifically, I was dealing with a laser where I didn't know much about technology. I didn't know sail shapes, mast bends. There's so many things that I didn't know about, and so I wanted to learn about that, and that's what I did. I continued my laser campaign for London, and about halfway through that, I think it was 2011. Hamilton Island Regatta, I was up there for the yachts, and I met Jimmy Spithill, and he said, oh, we've got to catch up and have a chat, and he offered, he said, would you like to come join the team after the Olympics? And for me, that was just sort of the perfect thing. Like, he said, do you want to join the team? And I said, oh, look, I'd love to, but I've got an Olympic campaign. And he said, no, that's fine. As soon as you finish the Olympics, come join us.
Nice of Jimmy to say that, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was nice. And then, so that's what I did. I finished the Olympics, I joined Oracle, and it's quite tough in the America's Cup world, especially myself coming from a laser. They respect you, I think, tactically and a competitor and all this, but when I'm looking up there and everyone's talking about sail shapes and design and foil shapes and all this, I sort of got pushed to the back of the room in that, and it's understandable. You've really got to earn your stripes in the America's Cup, and I remember when we had our capsize, but then when we got back on the water, we had 25 in the sailing team, but only 11 got to sail the boat. And I was never on the crew list, and I remember sitting there going, I'm watching these guys go sailing every day, and I was sitting on shore, cleaning winches, doing whatever it was, and I really said right then that I'm going to get on this boat, no matter what it takes. And John Kostecki was a tactician at the time, and being a San Fran local, and he knows everything about the bay, and great sailor, he had that position locked in, and I knew that. And so I said, well, I'm going to become a grinder, and I'm going to become as good as I can at grinding. And from that day, I went and looked up all YouTube videos and found all these videos and grinding technique, how to get the most out of your technique, and using the hips and whatever it is. And I became obsessed with it. When they were all out sailing every day, I just sat there on the grinding machine for hours and said, I'm going to become a grinder, I'm going to get on the boat. And then eventually Jimmy and all that noticed, and they said, okay, well, he's driven, that's for sure. And then they said, well, in the back pedestal there's John Kostecki at the back, and then there's a grinder, and then there's Jimmy. And they said, well, it would be really good to have a strategist, but looking at a different role and helping the tactician and seeing things that they might not. And they said, well, Tom can grind and he knows wind and tactics, and so I was put into that role, and it was a perfect fit for me. And from then on, I sailed every day on the boat. As of about April, I sailed every day, and all the way to the end of the Cup, and yeah, that's the story.
I think what a great story. What a great story. I think one of the interviews I read about you, Tom, was that nobody spent more time on the water than you, which just shows not only a dedication, giving us the insight to the grinders, but if there's one sailor that was on the water every day, it was Tom Slingsby. So it just shows your dedication and the great qualities that you have. Let me get back to you, Nathan. Short program, funding perhaps wasn't the greatest. You went through that disaster where I think you said the boat ended up like a taco. The unfortunate loss of a great mate of yours on the water. Did you think that did you the next day want to get back on the water, or did you think this is all over? Or how did you reconcile with it all, and what was the program, and what was the decision-making process to get back on the water?
It's been a very interesting year, to be honest. To start the year off, must have been February, lining up with slingers and the boys, and I remember them sailing from directly behind straight through to leeward and out the other side. And I said to the guys, are you sure foiling's not faster? Coming from a moth sailor. And one thing I learned a lot about the America's Cup is, it's not just, the 11 sailors on the boat. It's the 120 people in the team. And when I first joined, I'd come from a team of Goobs and myself and our coach and all the support staff of Yachting Australia to 120 people, and I was trying to work out where my position was in the team, just like Tom was. And I thought the best thing to do was to shut my mouth, to listen, and to learn as much as I could, and that's what I did for the first few months. And then as things went on, I would say something every now and then, and it was Ian Percy who really took notice and said, look, I think Nath really knows what he's talking about in a few different areas. And every time I'd say something, he'd listen pretty closely. And so that year kind of developed, and after we realised we were a bit off the pace, we knew we had a lot on, we had to make some decisions to move forward. And the thing with the America's Cup is you plan things years and years in advance, and it's not like the flick of the switch you're going to turn your boat into a foiling boat. You've got to make some changes. So as Goobs alluded to, we got the 45 foiling, which we were able to do in about a month, and we started sailing on that. So we took the challenge of, we're a long way behind, there's only 4 teams, let's try and beat Prada, and then let's try and beat Team New Zealand and see if we can get there. And so we got foiling on the 45, and that was one project. So there was a project to learn how to foil, and there was a project on learn how to get the wing to work. So I was a pretty big leader in the foiling because I'd sailed the moths a lot, And with Goobs, we'd go 45 sailing as much as we could. And so we were accelerated learning. We could learn faster than what, say, Glenn did with Team New Zealand, because, I went to New Zealand for 2 weeks and watched what they did every day. I'd go out on the water, follow them around, send home videos back to the guys in San Francisco. This is what we need, this is what we need. And came back after being away for almost a month, stepped on the 45 and went foiling straight away. So, there's lots of little different projects as you go along the way. And things were going really well for us. We had huge improvement, and we did some 45 racing against Tom and the Oracle boys, which was great for us. And we were still developing the 72 when we had our accident, and that sent the team into shock. To lose a guy when you're sailing, and to lose an amazing sailor in Bart Simpson. He was Ian Percy's best mate. They'd won a gold and a silver together for Great Britain in the star class. Was a really tough time for our team. And I remember sitting there for a few days just going shit, what the hell are we going to do now? We've lost a lot of our equipment, everyone's a little unsure what to do. And I remember Torbjörn, the owner of Artemis from Sweden, he comes out and he was, Goobs was there, I'm sure you'd remember, he was very inspirational in what, we needed. We were in shock, we didn't know if we could do this anymore. Not the fact that, whether we wanted to go sailing again, it was just the mountain to climb to get the boat in the water and go sailing again was so big. But I remember, between him, Torbjörn and Ian Percy, they were just great leaders in what we needed to do. They got the team together. They said, look, even if we don't make the starting line, just to get the boat in the water to go sailing was a huge achievement for us. And so, for 6 or 8 weeks, we did the necessary refinements to the boat, to our blue boat, which eventually did sail, to get it foiling. And in that time, Ian Percy said, look, Nath, we need Goobs on the boat. And I said, well, why do we need Goobs? He said, well, you and Goobs have this knack when you go sailing. You don't even need to talk. It just happens. And on the 45, when you're foiling and, as these guys know, that it's touch and go, whether it's going to keep foiling or touch back down or the windward hull's going to touch. And he said, you and Goobs just seem to know when he needs to ease and when you need to steer up to keep this thing in balance. And he said, we need that when we come to the big boat. We don't have time to train people up. We just need you two. So I was like, oh shit, so it's up to me and Goobs to make sure that this thing's going to happen. And I'm like, I know Percival, and he's just like, oh no, you boys will be fine. I'm like, mate, you're giving this $15 million boat to these 2 kids from Australia who can sail a 49er pretty good. And I'm just like, all right. And then I remember we were in a room about this big with our whole team, and we had a day just trying to work out what we're going to do. And Percy's like, all right, you got to get up and say what you think, because I had a lot of chats with him. I said, look, at the end of the day, I believe we're going to need 15 days of training before we can attempt to go around a race course. And often when you sail these big boats, you'd sail for an hour and something would break. So you go back in, lift it out, take 3 or 4 days to fix it, you go back again. And I said, no, what we need is 15 days of 4 hours a day sailing from start to finish with no breakages. And when the boat went in the water, we had 15 days until the first race. We'd missed all of the Louis Vuitton qualification, but we made the semi-final. And, we missed a few days for maintenance, but I think we did 8 days of training. And, we started and led around Mark 1 and couldn't jibe to save ourselves. But, we made a good attempt. And I think, it's just been a huge year for Goobs and myself to be involved in a team like that. And, I think there's one thing to do well and to win, but when you have difficulties, you learn a lot from it. And Tommy learned a lot from the capsize he was involved in. I'm sure Glenn destroyed a lot of stuff with Team New Zealand along the way, and we destroyed our fair share as well. So it was a big year, and one we're never going to forget.
Well done, mate. So to Glenn and Tom, your comments on a remarkable achievement of these guys. I mean, it was, Glenn, you want to start off, where they came from to the disaster they went through to get back and do it all. I mean, Nathan was underselling himself, but one of the most miraculous acts of modern day sailing to do what they did.
Oh, look, without a doubt. I mean, to see those guys, to see the disaster they had, and then come back and, a couple of months later, see them foiling down the first reach and leading round Mark 1, it was against the Linarossa guys. I mean, that was absolutely amazing, and I think it's a testament to the guys that sort of picked up the ball effectively from that, from being basically handed a boat that design-wise wasn't really up to it from day one, to then modify that boat and get it to the stage where they could actually foil well and get the boat to be sailed really accurately. I think was absolutely amazing, and the skills that these guys have, without these guys, at the handlebars and controlling the power source, I don't think the boat would have ever got to anywhere near the level that it did. So I take my hat off to them.
I'll come back to you, Tommy. I know I've just been notified by Al it's 10 minutes to go, and I know you could probably stay here till 1 this morning, but I know some of you got to work tomorrow and do things, so I'm conscious of the time. Let's get into the America's Cup. Tom, in very simple terms, one of the most outstanding achievements in sport, bigger than what Johnny did in 1983. There was a lot of talk about the technology, the days off, that Boeing came down, improved that. I'm not asking you to comment specifically on those things, but from where you started from to winning the America's Cup, just in a couple of minutes, just encapsulate what were the big issues that you addressed and how did you get there?
Yeah, obviously we had a speed problem. Team New Zealand came out, race 1, and upwind they were just blowing us apart. We could lead to the bottom mark and they'll pass us very easily. And for me, it was about at 6-1 down. We came in from that day after losing 2 races, and we sat in a sailors and designers meeting. We got a few key people from each and said, what are we going to do? We've got to do something here. And we addressed, okay, the problem is this, and we said, okay, no, can't do that. And with Grant Simmer, actually, he played a big part in this, in just deciding what we do to change. And I mean, you look back at it, and whenever I do an interview and they say, what did you change? And I list out all these small things that we changed. To me, it sounds like I'm lying as well, like that. All these little things could make such a big difference, but it really did. It really snowballed. So we changed the wing tune of the boat. We knew we needed a lower, faster groove to match Team New Zealand, and we changed the wing tune to do that, and that gave us a lower, faster groove. And from there, everything just started to snowball. We're sailing a lower, faster groove, and we started realising that we could really foil this thing upwind. We'd done a bit of practice before with foiling, and in the end, we decided to stay away from it for the cup race, just because to get on the foils, we felt you needed to bear away too much and build too much speed, and you'd lose about 100, 200 metres in getting on the foils. Once you're up, it was obviously quicker, but you would hit a boundary and you would have to do extra tacks, and we decided it wasn't going to work. With this new wing tune, we realised that we only have to bear away a couple of degrees on what we were sailing, and that made getting on the foils easier, and that opened up foiling upwind. And long short, foiling upwind was the key to us winning. We developed a mode that Team New Zealand hadn't discovered yet, or they had and it just didn't work for their boat. And once you're the quicker boat, everything falls into place. So I remember at 6-1 down when we made these changes, we went out and lost the next 2 races, but I came in from that day more confident than I've ever been at 8-1. I knew that the changes we'd made worked. We didn't sail great those days, and we lost both races by a small amount. But I remember coming in and in the debrief saying, we're onto something here, and we've got to just keep going down this path and keep developing it. And in these boats, the learning curve is so steep, and I knew that it would just take one little thing, and we stumbled across it, and it happened to be, well, for me it was at 6-1, but then we're at 8-1 before we could actually put it all together and get the streak going.
Well, it was such a learning curve, because I remember as strategist that you were, Tom, saying to the then tactician, John Kostecki, when you did that bottom gate about round 8 and you came off the double foiling, and I think your question to John over the microphone was, what in the fuck do you think you're doing?
I don't think I said it. I thought it, but
You said it. Glenn, did you notice the difference? Did you notice did you see Tom's comments? Tom's comments about detail. I read Nathan's comments recently about foiling, about how I get in the moth, and now you can measure things because you had the technology and all the little, the feelings that you'll get now going, that Nathan will get in the moths. When did you think that you were in a little bit of trouble, that these guys were just doing incremental increase in speed and just getting better at the game? Was it what race, and when did you never panic, but when did you start thinking that things were going to go perhaps against you?
Basically, the race where we just missed out on the time limit was basically the day that I thought we're in big trouble. Like they were mowing us down. They were getting quicker and quicker every day. Basically our campaign was designed that we'd basically go into the America's Cup with the resource that we had and the finance that we had, with our absolute best foot forward. And from race 1 to race 9, effectively, we were all on steep learning curves, but we'd gone in there and didn't really have much left in the tank. There were small incremental changes, but we'd basically put our best foot forward to be as fast as we could for race 1, and effectively that's what we did. We were, a little, less, we had a lot less resource basically than the Oracle guys, effectively, and we were just fully struggling just to maintain our boat to avoid breakdowns and avoid having the boat not work on us. So we were basically hoping that we were going to be competitive, and we were, and basically going through the regatta, these guys had their back up against the wall, and they did an absolutely amazing job to increase the performance of their yacht in a development class roughly 25%.
Yes.
Over a sort of a 7 or 8, 9 race period, and we just couldn't combat that, unfortunately, and it was fucking frustrating to say the least, and they made us down.
Guys, Alistair keeps winding me up on time, so I just got a couple of questions. We'll get over the America's Cup. Let's talk about the future, and what a great effort for Bob Oatley to make the challenge. And I think Bob had originally announced, Phil, that he was going to challenge in 2016. We had to remind Bob we have a Rio Olympic Games, and if we wouldn't mind doing it in 2017, so we've now got the 2017 America's Cup. Tom, you've come out for all the right reasons, defended it. Nationality may play a role in the future. You've re-signed with Oracle, and what's your program for the next America's Cup?
Obviously I've re-signed with Oracle, and it was an extremely tough decision. Now that Bob Oatley has come out, and they're going to launch a team, and to represent Australia is something I will do in the America's Cup. But for me, I've really got to sort of think about my career and making the right choice. As you said before, I really want to be part of a team that can win and has a very good chance of winning, and with the Defender we have that. And in this game I could break a leg, I could do something that will never make me the same, and if I want to get through my career and have a successful career, and I've really, each time I've got to make the smartest decision for me, and this time round that's Oracle, but I'm sure once the Oatleys get out there and get runs on the board and everyone sees how competitive and strong an Australian team will be in 4 years, that's going to be an extremely attractive offer if they're going, and that's something I'll definitely race for an Australian team in the future.
Good work, Tom. What about you, Glenn? What's your program?
Yeah, look, I've spoken to quite a few of the guys over the last few weeks, and unfortunately, the chat that I had with Ian Murray just happened a little bit too late, unfortunately, and I've actually re-signed with Emirates Team New Zealand.
Have you no shame, Glenn?
But reiterating Tom's words, to to be able to sail for Australia and have an Australian team would be something that I've always wanted to do since seeing John and the boys at the age of 6 at 3 o'clock in the morning watching that race. That's something that I've wanted to do. So unfortunately, timing-wise, it hasn't actually worked out for me. I've stuck to my word that I gave to Team New Zealand, but the opportunities to join Tommy again and Nathan Goobs, I was just fortunate that I was able to pick and choose a little bit, and but yeah, Team New Zealand for me is where I think some unfinished business still lies.
Well done, mate. I was going to ask Nathan next, but it's not right because he only does what Goobs tells him to do. So, Goobs, what are you thinking about, mate?
One thing me and Nath have both decided is that doing the Olympic Games is very important to us. And so we've been waiting for more information about the protocol to come out. And no decisions have been made yet.
Right. Well, okay, Nath, you're okay with that?
Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, as Goob said, we're here at the moment sailing the 49er this week, and we've enjoyed the Cup a lot, and we're really looking forward to campaigning towards Rio. We had a great time at the London Olympics, and we really enjoy working with Yachting Australia and our coach Emmett Lasage in particular. So, this is our first. We did the Worlds a few months ago, but this is our first event back in the 49er, and we're full steam ahead with that. And we'd love to be involved in the Cup, and we're still working out our plans at this point.
So that's why you guys are in the shirts today, and Slingsby and I are in the Italian handmade suits. So let's talk about Victor, Peter. And I'll talk about for you, John. Let's just, before we close, I've run 5 minutes only over time, which I think is an outstanding job on my behalf, Alistair. You guys talked about Rio, your mindset on it, and going hard again, and you're back in training, and that's the number one goal that we have is back to go and do another job in Rio. What about you, Glenn? What are you up and about doing? Thinking about Olympic sailing at all?
Yeah, look, I'd love to have the opportunity, to go to an Olympic Games again, and winning a silver medal. That burning desire to go one step better definitely burns away deep inside for sure. But I've got to be a little bit realistic with my yachting, and at the end of the day, I think you'd be doing yourself and your country a disservice and the team you're working for a disservice to try and do both really well. So I've had to make a pretty big call, and I've decided that the technical and the science and the engineering aspects of the America's Cup is really what's making me tick at the moment, and it's a part of my yachting that I think the experience I've had previously lends itself more and more towards, so it really does excite me going forwards. Having said that though, I'd really love to have the opportunity, as I've said to Yachting Australia, to be involved in some aspect going forward and helping our younger guys and slightly older guys, Darren, sorry, to
very old guys, you mean?
Very old guy, but whoever makes it through, going forwards to Rio, I'd love to be in a position where I could offer some form of assistance and help and knowledge, whether it be in rigs or whatever, going forward to make sure that we have our multi-hull team win a gold medal at Rio.
Tom, you've made your decision clear. We know which road you're going down. You've not totally removed coming back and going around again, but it's not it's not number one on your agenda.
No, at the moment for me, I'm just going to concentrate on the America's Cup. Obviously, to go back and do another campaign, it's something I've really thought a long time about, and I'm not ruling it out at all. I said the other day that I'll rule out delays though. If I come back, it'll be a fin.
Yep.
But then I saw Robert Scheidt go and win the Worlds, and I'm like, that'd be a good challenge to go against him.
Be a great challenge, Tom, actually.
I actually went and started Googling the next world titles, where they were. But no, for me, if I come back, it'll be in a fin, and I'll see how my program sets up, and if it's a viable option, if the Australian sailing team are happy, I might make a bit of a late run, being I've put on about 8 kilos since the Olympics. I'm now a fin sailor weight, and a generally light wind venue in Rio, it could really suit me and a fin. So we'll see in a couple of years.
You know what, Tom? They've got stuff on YouTube. You can actually learn how to sail one of those things. With great respect to the coaches. With great respect. Gentlemen, what a pleasure it's been. Let me just wrap this up. As I said before, what a great position that Australian sailing is in. What a great position that it plays on the world stage, and you've just seen a fine example here. We talked about, John Bertrand being introduced as a legend into the Sporting Hall of Fame. We saw Victor introduced into the Hall of Fame. An outstanding achievement. One question I didn't ask, and I don't probably want to, won't delay this any further, but I think you understand that to win gold medals at Olympic Games, it's not only the individual. Victor and I have had long talks about the word team. And team is very important, and I think that what has been displayed to you tonight is the manner in how these young men conduct themselves and the great camaraderie and the great support that they give each other. And this has been, in many ways, not only created by their upbringing from their parents, but from the work that I'm sure that you'll agree with me, guys, the Australian sailing team has done to give this group of guys that extra spirit. John Calvert-Jones asked me to mention that we have brochures to become a patron of the Australian sailing team. I think there's a summer special on, John, $80,000, and we can make you a member tonight. So God bless us, John. Ladies and gentlemen, for the group of these fine athletes, these 4 athletes up here, to all of those that are involved with this outstanding sport in Australia, thank you for being here tonight. It's been a pleasure, and can you please thank these gentlemen for their participation.